actually did say, why did I not use my hyphenated name? Because I use it everywhere else, but I didn't put it on the book. But I'm the executive director at Caron Outpatient Treatment Center. I'm also a clinical associate professor at Philadelphia College of Osteopathic Medicine, and I teach at a few other schools too, so super excited.
Very nice resume. Awesome. And Dr. Central Crawford.
Hi, I'm Dr. Central Crawford. I'm the author of Urge Fix, which is a recovery guide. I'm also the host and producer of Dr. Central's show that's on Zonda TV network. I'm also a local psychiatrist in Reading, PA. I have my own practice as well as I work for a hospital system. But my practice is Options PA. You can find me at optionspa.com.
Josh.
Well, I don't know about that. No, just super excited to have you both here. This is your second time, and the first time was amazing, so I'm super excited for today.
Okay. So pretty much the topic that we're going to be speaking on today will be trauma. How to face these situations when you go home for holidays, right? And you have had past traumatic events, and then facing those people during the holidays when you have to go and visit if those traumatic events happen to you within your family. So I was going to ask Dr. Ramona Roberts to elaborate on that and how.
The first word that comes to mind is boundaries, but that word I think needs to be broken down because I think when people hear that term, they think of it as punitive. Oftentimes it has this stigma with it that if I set some boundaries, I'm punishing you, and maybe you're not the person who was the perpetrator. So I think just understanding that boundaries are being kind to yourself and also being kind to other people in your family that you have relationships with. Because if I think about the variety, of people probably watching this and spending time with their families, we might have some that come from very individualistic cultures where it's like, I'll just worry about me, I don't care how that affects you. Or very collectivist cultures where it's like, hey, the family value piece is really strong for me, and I'm afraid that if I set a boundary, that goes against that, that piece of me that's like just, at the core of thinking about other people in my group. And so I think just understanding that boundaries means I'm being kind to myself and I'm being kind to the other people that I do care about the relationships with. And with that, obviously it's going to come learning how to communicate that to those other people without having to give your story and your details, because maybe not everyone in your family knows what happened to you. And so understanding that you can create those kind of, instead of using the word boundaries, let's say parameters and expectations, without having to give your whole narrative, because I know that's something that people struggle with too. Like, well, I don't want to say I can't show up to Aunt Susie's house because her husband molested me, because they don't want to necessarily out their experience.
I think people do think of boundaries as a negative thing, but I have had to start thinking of it as just self-respect. Allowing myself to make sure that people are not crossing my boundaries, so to speak, or the line with me, so that I can enjoy them and they can also enjoy me without me getting defensive, without me lashing out, or without them crossing me and then I have to leave. So the best way to do that, I think, is just to have open communication and not be afraid of saying no to people, or saying, well, I'm not really into that. Because if you don't say it and you allow them to push you to a limit or somewhere that you don't want to go, then you're going to get resentment, and then that's just a whole line of, I guess, fountain or well that you're falling into, and then the next thing you're invited to, you're not going to want to show up because you didn't respect yourself enough to say no or set the limit to them.
But now, does it come to a spot where you have to take time though? Meaning you have to be able to deal with that trauma within yourself before you put yourself in a situation like an entire event, household thing. For me, I would definitely say that I waited until I was okay enough to have that strength to say what what you both have alluded to as far as like, hey, I'm not really into that conversation, but I just waited until I was strong enough to be able to, stand in my own skin, so to speak, to be able to put myself in that situation, because for me, I was scared of being overwhelmed with just the thoughts in my head alone, not even the verbal conversations, just how I would feel when I saw so and so. I was one that dealt with inner family trauma, so it was just the thought process of getting to see that individual would throw me for a loop for years. So then it took me a process of just gaining that strength to be able to be in the same, household with
Right.
an individual.
And being okay with yourself, what part of that process is also being able to just identify, right? Because some people don't even necessarily identify yet with whether it's the word trauma, significant life event, adverse experience. I got something that impacted me. Like sometimes I don't use the word trauma because I think even with that, there's so much negative connotation. Like I can remember giving someone a diagnosis of PTSD and having them tell me, no, you won't put that in my chart. Why not? Oh, because that means I'm weak. I should be strong enough to overcome this or to put that in the past. And wow, like the amount of education that I realized this person needed, and that there's a lot of people that think of trauma like that. That if I can't be able to function in my family member's house, then something's wrong with me, right? Instead of something being wrong with the person who did whatever to me, right? So I think sometimes it's really hard just to become that self-aware to know, wait, I do have an issue with this person. This impacted me. It's not my fault. And so you might not know until too late, right? Someone might show up to the family event and then later they're dealing with their symptoms, their cravings, their, as you said, get stuck in your head and that negative self-talk spiral, right? And then it's kind of like after the fact, oh, maybe there's something I need to face that has to do with that family dynamic. So we might not recognize it till after, but it's never too late, whether it's beforehand having that self-awareness or after. And I would just say encouraging people to tune in to their own experience, right? So when you're talking about your thoughts, tune into what's happening in your body, tune into what's happening when you're getting the invitation and you start to notice a heart rate change, or you start sweating, or you start kind of pacing, and what is that about for me, before you can even then decide what parameters do I want, right?
So I hear you guys all talking, and I'm going back to my childhood traumatic events, and I remember the holidays, when the holidays would come around and the perpetrators would be in the room, and the way I felt like I was a prisoner in my own world. I was closed out. I have a painting in my office that shows a grown man and a little boy inside of him, right? And a grown woman with a little girl inside of them. And that's the child that stopped growing. So the physical body kept growing. So my point to that is that as an adult today, I still don't like the holidays, just due to the traumatic events. People in my life don't understand it because they didn't go through the events that I went through. But you get tense even when the holidays come up. So you have to prepare yourself to get through the holidays. And you see everybody else is so jolly, having a great time. But in your mind, that's not your time of year.
Right.
So for people that have had these traumatic events and have those feelings that are in their substance use disorder, right, that are currently using out there, like what's the advice that we can give them to get through those moments?
Well,
That's deep.
yeah. So, drowning yourself in the substance is not going to change the traumatic event. So you do need to seek help through therapy, AA, NA, and also when you identify the trauma, you identify the perpetrator. I think you need to be able to communicate with yourself as well as your family what happened, and respectfully, because people do get triggered and then they just I feel like they just throw a ball at people, and then it's like, how do they handle all that you just brought to them without, you know, reacting and feeling as if they didn't protect you, or maybe that is a lie. But I do find that if you don't communicate your needs with people, then you really can't fault it when the perpetrator walks through the door, and then all of a sudden you're in this space, and then you're spiraling down a rabbit hole, and then what are you going to go do? Run and use this drug? Or are you going to act out? So if you do communicate with your family, if they don't respect your boundary, that's one thing. But if you don't communicate with yourself and your family about, well, I need to know who's on the guest list. You know, who's going to be there? You know, and plan if you even want to go. And it's okay sometimes to say no. You know, you don't have to spend the holiday with particular people. You can make your own family, you can make your own holiday, do traditions. You know, but communication, I think, is the key. Identifying what the problem is first. You know, maybe you don't want to be with Uncle JoJo.
Right.
You know?
And substance use too is, you know, it's self-medicating, it's avoidance, right? And just because you bury something doesn't make it dead. You know, if anything, the longer we avoid, the more we struggle with it, right? Because it's like we're carrying it around. It's sitting in that little closet back there saying, like, can I come out? And sometimes, if we don't listen to it enough, it'll just open the door when we least expect it. And then, like you said, here comes the ball of fire we're throwing at somebody, right? And they don't understand where is that ball of fire coming from, right?
I remember sitting at the table. Unfortunately, I had more than one occurrence where I threw that ball of fire because I was not honest with anybody in my family about how I felt about past events. So what I would try to do is fake it till I made it. So I would walk in, especially after I got into a relationship with my wife, because she's so big on the holidays. She's huge on the holidays. I relate a lot to Lee. I have a lot of, you know, negative thoughts that come with the holidays from my past. So, but what I tried to do was fake it till I made it. When we got together, she would start to say, hey, well, they're doing something over here at your dad's, do. So then I would go. And what happened would, I would sit there, and as soon as those feelings would start to come, I didn't open up, I didn't take a minute, I didn't walk outside. I grabbed whatever was in front of me, whatever drink was in front of me. I'd go to the bathroom a few more times. And then before you know it, a few hours of doing that, now you have that courage to say, you know what, now I feel like we should talk about all the stuff that I'm upset about, right?
Yeah.
And everybody's sitting there, everybody's having these conversations and laughing. No, but here comes Josh from left field. But wait a minute, where was my love? And that's happened. And I don't recommend that at all because it's just not the proper way to, you know, just to release your feelings for yourself. You know, because I felt so ashamed because I had valid points, but they got thrown to the side because of my delivery, because of how I was intoxicated, how I was under the substance. Then it was like, oh, he's just crazy. And then everything that you have to say just kind of goes to the wayside.
I think Josh, you bring up
That's
such a great example
that's
too, because what happens is now all this gets unleashed, and what they pay attention to is not where that is coming from.
That's right.
Instead, they pay attention to your delivery, and if you go off and use, so you're asking like about the substance use piece of it, instead what happens is the focus becomes on you relapsed. And it's like, wait, did you even know what led up to that? Instead, all the focus gets put on you as the bad guy, the bad person, right? Because now you're going out and using, and no one's giving any attention to the stuff on the front end that was kind of the impetus for that,
Yes,
right?
yes.
I think nothing's worse than invalidating your own trauma.
Right. That's right.
Because, like, you know, you just gave this delivery, and now people are like,
Yeah,
we
this
can't,
guy's crazy.
yeah, he's crazy, he's nuts, we can't believe
Yeah.
what he says, you know, and then it's just like a spiral. And then the next time you try to approach it, once you're not drinking, once you're not using, then it's like, well, remember when you did that?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I've had that exact conversation. So where it was just kind of, it was then made a joke of. But man, keep the bottle away from Josh, you know, and then that just, you know, triggers a little bit of a different response, right? Now I'm feeling played out. Now I'm feeling attacked, and then it leads to shutting down. Just forget it. You know what? It's not even worth bringing up. But then you have to have that mind state to be able to think about the fact that, okay, it's getting shut down now, but have that conversation at the best place, you know. And it took me a long time to understand that it wasn't necessarily I said anything wrong. I just picked the absolute wrong time to say something.
And it's not just when, so you gave the great example of having the liquid courage, right?
Yeah.
But it can happen when there's not even substance in the room, right? Because I put this in the book. I had a patient explain to me, I often use the term Hulk rage events, like Incredible Hulk, you know? So any Marvel fans in there, I do take that analogy. Thank you. Okay, we got a good one. We read that piece. So we're not pulling any Marvel fans with that, but the Incredible Hulk analogy in there is something I think a lot of people who are trauma survivors can relate to. And this woman talked about how she had a Hulk rage event when her partner put the butter back in the wrong place in the fridge. She wasn't drinking. She wasn't high on anything. It triggered this place of my voice doesn't matter from when she was a kid, and her voice saying no didn't matter. And so throughout her adult life, she carved out these ways to have control and to be able to, you know, pull her own strings on things. And so even like super organization and where things have to go. And so when it's not put back in that spot, she unleashed like verbal vitriol just spewed all over the place. And there wasn't a substance in the room, you know? So it could be tapped into and poked in any kind of way.
It's funny you say that because to this day, you know, I got over 10 years sober, and I still have characteristics, right? And there's certain ways that people talk to me sometimes, and it happens at home a lot. I love my wife. Don't take this wrong. But there's times the way she addresses something to me, my mind is like, I just can't believe you just talked to me that way. Who do you think you are, right? And that's because it enlightened something in me from my past without me even knowing. My first reaction is just to come back with the wrong comeback. And she's like, "What's your problem?"
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Then you got
and then I'm back to normal. I'm like, I don't have a problem. What are you talking about?
Now she has the problem.
Yeah,
Right.
I'm like,
and then
oh,
she's
geez.
looking at you like you're crazy. Why do you act this way? You know, and it just goes back
And there's
and
no
forth.
drink or substance there, you know, and it's just that's so weird. I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, my wife too. I believe it's not just me and you. It's the relationship aspect of, you know, especially coming from somebody. And this is just how I look at me. I came up a lot different than my wife. My wife has had her own trauma because, unfortunately, you don't have to be knee deep in substance abuse to go through things, right? So my wife has never smoked a cigarette. She's never took a sip of wine. She's never done anything like that. But she has her reasons for that, right? Because of things that she's been through. But mine was much more, the chaos is where I felt at home because that's what my dynamic of family was. The louder you could be, the more obnoxious you could be. That's what was on the forefront at all times. So now I'm get with my wife, right? This poor girl had absolutely no idea what I was, because in the beginning of a relationship, you know, I'm lovey-dovey, I'm dropping flowers off at work and I'm doing all this stuff, but then I still have all of this stuff inside that she hasn't seen yet. And I remember early on, it was so much work to be able to get to a spot where communication was just something of that was obtainable, just being able to speak to one another, because she would do the same thing and it would trigger 14 different things in me, and it was just like, she never meant it like that. She was like, "Hey, what do you want for dinner?" I didn't have dinner. It was just so much, and I always would come back so aggressive, and it took so long. I can't explain to you three how much work. I still work on it because sometimes I come across my defense mechanism my entire life was the more aggressive I can look, the more angry I can be, the more people stay away. And it just then now changed into, that's not who I am. Yeah. I love to talk to people. I love to make people happy. I love to have conversations. I love knowledge. You can't, gain knowledge without learning, right? So you have to be able to speak. And it just took so long to be able to get to that. And that leads to my question is, what can we do to make the people that are still sitting there and sick and suffering understand that this is constant work, that it's not something that we can fix maybe before Christmas next weekend.
Well,
And that it goes hand in hand, the mental
Right.
and the substance, because we're trying to cover up with the substance, like you said earlier.
yeah.
So,
If I can answer that, so some of the things you also already said, which is I love that you said, Josh, about it's not just like me, it's me and her in this, right? So I think for people who might be watching, to know that it's not just the person who's recovering from XYZ, right? It's the person in the partnership with them. They have to figure this out together, because one of the things you mentioned, you push people away. Why? That's a survival thing.
Yep.
That is your brain and body working for you, because the more you push people away and be aggressive and put them off, the less likely they can hurt you, right? And so here you have this relationship that now seems healthy, right? In the beginning, I imagine there's been times where you tried to pull out the chaos from her, like almost to create it, right? Because
no.
never. Is she watching? You following, right? What's that number?
Forgot.
Because I can imagine, there were times like that, because when we grow up with chaos, that becomes norm. So people say, like, you don't want a normal relationship? Well, what's normal to you? Because to me, this is normal. So instead, we use the words healthy and unhealthy, or adaptive and maladaptive. And so for you, what was your norm was chaos. And so when you're in a relationship that doesn't have chaos, you might self-sabotage it, because what's unfamiliar, even though healthy, may be scarier than what is unhealthy yet familiar to you, right? So that can feel safe because you know what to expect. You know how to sit there with the bat and hit the balls as they come at you, right? So you don't know what to do when the balls aren't flying. And so you're like, all right, I need to create something, right? So I would really say for viewers that, especially viewers who aren't the person trying to recover from, again, X, Y, Z, whatever it is, the substance of trauma, is to know that it behooves you to be as invested in the healing process, because when you do push your wife away, she's got to have that understanding, just like the example you gave with yours, that he's not crazy, right? And for you to be able to understand each other, this is a joint effort here. We got to be able to do this together. So I think for them to understand and make sense of it, right, so that they can come at you with some kind of compassion. They can also have their boundaries, their parameters, and expectations. But they don't have to turn away from you when something happens. Instead, they can have a different conversation about, hold up, maybe I just need to step back. Something might be tapped into with Josh here before I now start unleashing back on Josh.
Right.
You know?
Right. Absolutely.
I don't know what you add to that.
Yeah, I definitely think the person, the partner who's having to deal with it does need to step back, because as soon as you bring the chaos, then all of a sudden they're feeling validated, so they're just going to keep going and just keep pulling it out of you. And then it's like a just self-sabotaging, chaotic moment.
And right now they're hurt.
And then they're hurt, and then now they're hurting you, and then it's just
Hurt brings more
hurt. Yeah, and so
Hurt people.
being
hurt
able to
people.
step away from each other and take a moment to regroup, and then try to come back and communicate, if that's even possible within the next same day, will be best. But yeah, I grew up in a very chaotic household. I was actually talking to my sister about this like 2 days ago, and she's like, I just thought that was normal, like cutting clothes and throwing clothes out the window and things like that. I was like, yeah, I never thought that was normal. But I realized that having to deal with that in my, I guess being a psychiatrist has actually helped me a lot, because I have to help other people express themselves, so it makes me be more expressive. And I'm like, that wasn't normal. How have I put this in my own life? And how can I correct that so that I'm not going down this rabbit hole of self-sabotage in my relationships, in my career, in my life? So.
And that brings me to listen to this conversation. It brings me to why I try to be a much happier person over the holidays. So I try to adopt people in the community to give them a better Christmas or a better holiday. Like the Lopez family that we're going to donate bicycles to this year. They had a really traumatic event, right? And the whole community came together and they gave all this money on GoFundMe last year when the event happened, right? But then they don't think that then kids have to continue to grow and they don't get over that traumatic event. All 5 kids witnessed this event. So that was very touching to me just because I too had no mom, I too had no father. I seen my one aunt get thrown out the window over the holidays and she died, so that stayed with me. So when I seen that, and it was a block away, and it was the kids went to the same school that my stepdaughter goes to, that really bothered me, and I said, I gotta do something. Because I understand that that's gonna go on for the rest of their life. So I wanted to adopt them and make sure that they're gonna be okay over the years. So it's not just that first year they get this bunch of money. That's a big family now. That's 11 people in that family. They went from the sister that took the kids on, she already had 4. So now they get 5. Now they got a family of 11. So you can go through money. Can you just imagine that food bill?
Yeah.
That's a huge bill. So, doing that, it makes me feel good for the holidays. And it's funny because my wife always says, man, you do so much for the community. Like, aren't you happy? That makes me happy. That's what makes me happy. I still got to do a lot of work I remember when she put the Christmas tree up this year. Before she put it up, in my mind, I said, I'm going to make this a really good Christmas. I'm going to join her and do the Christmas tree. And I woke up the next day, Christmas tree was up. I was like, are you serious? And I didn't even tell her about it. But, it's a working process. So just got to keep working on it.
Yeah, and you point out that when there's a traumatic event that happens, there isn't just a one moment where we do something and now it makes it all better, right? So like you said, for the rest of their life, they're gonna have a missing piece, right? They don't have their parents. Now, they don't need to suffer from trauma for the rest of their life,
Right.
because we have clinicians like that, we have therapy out there, we have interventions so that people don't have to suffer forever with it. But there is this wraparound investment that, and for each person it can be a different amount of time, right? So we know a third of people that experience trauma don't ever, suffer from any symptoms. A third suffer from symptoms very short term, and a third go on to have, a PTSD diagnosis more longer term, right? But, so it's different timeline for each individual person, but there definitely needs to be a significant wraparound, in terms of that investment, whether it's the community, the family. Those become what we call protective factors, right? Those are the things that help them not have to suffer 30 years from now with this experience that happened last year,
And it comes from the individuals such as yourselves that I'm very excited to meet them. Because with us being able, like the saying, it takes a village, and that type of thing will allow them to learn how to love, learn how to talk about it, process this stuff at an earlier age, to where that when they're our age, they're not walking around so angry at the world because they still haven't gotten to understand what really happened. That's the thing with my take on the trauma that I went through as a kid. We didn't have that, that type of, sexual abuse isn't just something that you talk about at the dinner table, when you're a kid. You don't come home from school and they say, hey, we'll do. So then when those things happen at such a young age, for me, I always personalize, for me, I didn't want to talk about it at all. So therefore, I never processed it. I never even really begun to feel anything except for, wait a minute, I know that ain't right. And then that ain't right turns into anger. It turns into mistrust. I don't trust anybody now. But I think as our job as a community, as being, in the front lines and being these, leaders, is to change that way of thinking, to change the way that we approach situations of trauma, of substance abuse disorder, and take away that stigma. And you know, that is a huge fight. We all know that that's a huge fight that we have to continuously battle, is the stigma. But if we can get more individuals such like ourselves that have been through things to get more comfortable with talking about them, at the moment it might not seem like it, but I promise everybody that's watching that you begin to be able to fight. You begin to move through life a lot better with being able to process these things.
I know when I think about childhood trauma, you know, it took me till I was 41 until I started dealing with those problems. So talking to the people that are out here still sick and suffering, I'm sure that a lot of the viewers are still struggling with their substance abuse because they don't want to deal with their current mental health issue, right? And when we say mental health, most people will say, oh my God, they think I'm crazy. No, it's not that we think you're crazy. It's that you need to address it because that's what's built your behaviors to where you're at today. And then the hiding part of using your substance. I know for me, I'm very open about my whole life story. I was sexually abused from the time I was 4 to 14 by a male uncle, step uncle. And then they told me they loved me. Like, how do you love me and you're abusing me? My stepfather physically abused me and treated me like I was not loved at all, and then told me he loved me. So as growing older, I would tell people I loved them very easily. All you had to do was tap me on the shoulder, I love you, you know, and that's why I went through so many women. So everybody that's out here struggling right now, you're in your moment using, but there's reasons why you're using. And you need to look for help. Call us up. I'm very passionate about this. I say this every week. I say my number a million times. My number is 484-772-7079. You can message me on here. And it brings me to this lady that reached out to me this past week. The first thing she told me was, you know, this is her second DUI in 2 months. And the first thing she told me, she's like, oh, I had so much hurt in my past, and you know, I was sexually abused so many times. So it's not, you know, when you look at that, it's not the substance, you know, that's self-medicating. So deal with what's the real issue, the core of the problem, so then you can work on being abstinent from the substance.
And we have so many good trauma clinicians out there now. We also have some that, you know, I would say do your homework and do your research and ask around for feedback, right? But you definitely want to process that because, Lee, even your example with the words I love you, so an experience like that can lead someone to not ever really be able to experience the real joy of what love can be. You know, there's all kinds of emotions we could put in there, what love really is, because, you know, it's an up and down, an ebb and flow. There's all kinds of things wrapped into that. But the joy that comes out of that, you can rob yourself of because for you, someone saying I love you also means I hurt you. And so when you've got a loved one, you know, you've got a wife who loves you and has no intention to hurt you, no malice, you can't absorb that, right? And then you almost fight that off or just never really get to fully experience what that joy is. And so that stuff is what can be worked on in therapy, is really like tackling and breaking and chipping away the lies around the initial love you, right? So that you can take in the other love you now, right? And I think what you said too, Josh, about anger. And then the person who's carrying this anger, it ends up becoming internalized, right? Like, so what we need to help people with is taking that anger and allowing it to be placed and directed where it needs to, at the person who did harm them, and then work through that anger so that it doesn't become this thing where now you're completely messing up your life, where almost that person still has control over you, right? And they're not even, let's say, thinking about you today, maybe, right? But now you internalize this, and I deserve bad, and I must have been, all that negative self-talk. It's like, I must have done this for this to happen, or I could have prevented, or I should have done this, or if I'd only done this, this would have happened. And working through all that cognition so that you don't internalize that anger to now you're constantly just hurting yourself over and over again, right? Like this woman that you're explaining, right? through her substance use, she's hurting herself over and over, right?
I do tell my patients that, you know, you do need to redefine love and also grieve the actions that have happened to you in the past, whether positive or negative. And once you redefine love, you know, I guess biblical love is kind, love is patient, love is not selfish, not there's a whole little Bible verse that I don't remember. But you know, I do find that people do start traumatizing themselves because they ruminate over the trauma that they experienced in their childhood or in their bad relationship or in their active substance use, and then all of a sudden they're a prostitute, you know, they're jumping in and out of men's cars, or they're using dirty needles, they're getting infections, they're cutting themselves, they're doing all kinds of things that can harm themselves, and then, you know, they're not being kind to themselves, and then they're so mad at the world, so angry at the world, and it's so redirected to the wrong person, because now you're harming yourself, and that person may have moved on in their life, not even thinking about you, or on to their next victim, which is a whole other conversation. But you know, I find that if you redefine love and you truly learn how to love yourself, and you start being kind to yourself, then you can also be more aware of to work on your own issues and be able to identify people that can help you, who can truly love you and work you through the grief and the trauma that you've experienced in your lifetime.
Yeah, it's when you just said that, it reminded me of my early recovery. When I came into recovery, I tried to rekindle my 20-year marriage. And we were both so messed up that year I took out to refix that relationship, it didn't work out. So we separated. So then I talked to my pastor and I said, what do I do? He's like, take this time for yourself. Work on you. So needless to say, I was single for 4 years. And I just did a lot of work on myself. I started loving myself. I was able to give myself self-affirmations in the morning and felt good about myself. I couldn't even be alone in a room because I wasn't at peace. And I remember my mentor, Ryan Herrera, he's just like, you got to learn to be comfortable with yourself in order to be comfortable around people. So I used to live at the Y in a room. So I would go and I had DJ equipment and everything, and I would sit in that room and not turn nothing on. And that was the hardest thing for me to do. I could not do it. And it took months and months and months, and I finally was able to do it. But over time, 4 years I was single, and then I felt really good about myself, and that's when I met Julie. And I'll never forget the day that I met her. I tell everybody the story. She came into the Y for a job, and the door, she has really long hair, so when the door opened, it like blew it in the air like an angel. And I was like, wow. So I was like, she's God sent, right? So I quickly positioned myself, hi, I'm Lee. And we started this friendship. And like you said, you know, I did everything in the beginning. Roses, I did everything. Just very romantic. And over time, that for some reason, as a substance use person, right, a person in recovery, it's like we're so addicted to the chase, right? So it was conquered, and then you just slowly forget everything that got you together, and you have to constantly keep working on that. I'm a very busy person, you know, and I'm sitting here listening to you guys talk, and it's like giving me therapy because, you know, I know the things that I have to do, and I have to get back to that. So I appreciate you guys.
And you know, like that's something that two people, you want to be in a relationship, two people need to think about that regardless of any background of trauma. You can take anything bad out of someone's history, and you still got to know, as an adult, you want to be in a relationship. This is a constant investment, over and over, and a constant renegotiation. Because, you know, my husband and I have been together almost 20 years. Like, over that 20-year span, a constant renegotiation of the expectations, who does what, the equity, whatever that, because equity isn't 50-50, right? It could be 70-30 when, you know, you got, whatever it is, the situation's happening. It could be like 80-20 one time, 90-10, and the 90 is like, I'm like, what the heck is happening? You know, or the other person who's the 90 and you're the 10, and you're like not recognizing you're only 10. Like, you're like, oh, whoa, you know, I gotta bring my number up a bit, but it's a constant renegotiation, and there's a willingness, you know, and a vulnerability,
Yes.
and you know, relationships really are about, you know, you talk about love and redefining it, and like, what is it to be unconditional love, and accepting people for who they are and where they are, but at the same time having an expectation you're going to evolve together, right? Because you meet someone, let's say you're 22, like, you're not going to be like the 22 self forever.
Right.
Each person's going to evolve, right? You know, and then when you add in history of trauma, history of substance use, and then you have trauma together, let's say, in a relationship, and man, all the things you really need to be invested in tackling together.
It's funny you say that, because as I sit here thinking, that beginning part of the relationship is like that chase. You chase them, you're falling in love, everything's so great. But then once you get into the daily hustle and bustle, and that fire goes away, right? Not that you stop loving each other. You guys still mean good for each other, but man, I forget where I was going with that. But anyways, it's like that can lead you right back to the way you originally felt about yourself.
If you don't put the work in to continue to grow.
Right.
You know, because with mine, I was this gangbang drug user, right? And this poor girl, she was amazing. She was an LPN, and now she fell for the hustle and bustle of me being in her inbox. And then before you know, we built a relationship. We began to talk to each other. But we've been together 10 years now. We have 3 kids. And when we talk about it now, especially with my journey and where I am, that the work was not easy. But the reason why she tells me not to say it, but I owe Tina so much is because she never quit on me. She never quit on me, no matter what I was going through, no matter how many times I fell flat on my face. I used to run from this girl. Like I would, God bless my mom's soul, when she was still here, I'd be like, you know what, Tina, you stay here, I'm out. I'd grab my little, you know, because I had like a little bag. I didn't have much. I'd grab my little bag, I'd go to my mom's, and I'd be like, Mom, don't let her in. An hour and a half later, Tina comes walking in the bedroom, right? And now I'm looking, I'm like, what are you doing? Like, I'm trying, and then I meant it back then. I'd be looking at her and I'm telling her, I'm trying to save your life here. Like, I'm trying to save you from all of the stuff that I'm about to put you through, because you have no idea. And, man, that girl, love you, she buckled in and she went for the ride with me. And what she did is help me get Josh to come out more. She seen me well before I knew who I was. I had no idea who I was really. The fact that I love what I do today is my career, being in the field, being in service, being out here, being on the front lines for good, you know, fighting a good fight. She knew this is who I was, and simply she helped. And not to get all over the place, to go right into what you guys are saying is it's a constant work. That's what we always talk about on our podcast is in recovery, in, you know, dealing with trauma, dealing with all of the stigmas. It's work, and as long as you put in that work, you end up being great, right? When I worked at DEC, I had no idea how to run a machine. So I'm standing in front of this huge thing, spinning buttons, flashing lights. I'm like, I'm about to ruin some shit. But the more you go to work, you get better. And it's the same aspect of inner self, of being us and being able to talk about our traumas. The only thing is yeah, I got great at working those machines at DECA, right? I got amazing at that. But this means so much more. Putting in the work within yourself means so much more, because then you're able to value those relationships, you know, save them. Like, there was a time when me and Tina, it was a rough 1.5 years, 2 years. We barely spoke. We were co-parenting. We were roommates. And it sucked. Like, I constantly slept with my back to her. She slept with her back to me. We would talk only if it had something to do with the kids. and that's not healthy. But the one thing that we decided on was that we weren't ready to quit yet. We weren't walking away. And what we did was we slowly started to rekindle that fire. I'll never forget this trip. I know she won't. We said, you know what? We need to figure out what we're going to do. Because these kids are involved. And we can't let them see this. Because then that's going to trickle down to them, right? They're going to think that, oh, well, mom, you could be mom and dad, but they don't like each other. But it's all right. No, we're not trying to do that here. We took a trip to the Poconos. Just me and her. And we literally did nothing. We walked around the streets and we talked and we rekindled and we got that stuff out and we started to work on each other from that weekend. And it's not easy. I know it's cute. It sounds like a fairy tale, but it ain't easy. You know, it's not. It's gonna bring some tears. It's gonna bring some frustrations, but I promise you that it's worth it.
Big ups to you and Tina for staying the course, because we know the divorce rate, the remarriage divorce rates, all of that. I think our culture here in the United States is, I mean, we are largely, granted there are people that are from different cultural groups within the United States where this doesn't apply, but we are largely a very individualistic society here, right? And I think what we also need to be careful of, those watching that are in relationships as described, right, is that there's also social pressure to walk away.
Yes.
Right? So I imagine you and Tina both had people in your camps, whether it's family members, friends, saying, you need to leave his ass, right? You know, like, you, and
For her, way more than me, I'm sure.
Right? But you know, like, I think just as a society, as friends, if you have friends that are going through things like this, think before you give that kind of advice and suggestions, because what we need more of is people that are willing to stay the course and help us grow together, right?
Yes.
And what it sounds like you're telling me Tina did with you is she stayed the course to see you value yourself. Because you weren't going to be able to value her and give her what she needed until you were able to value yourself to see you even deserve something like this. And so for those that have that kind of childhood trauma in particular, I mean, because we can have trauma happen at any age. You get a trauma for the first time happen at 60, you know? But the childhood trauma especially, because of the kind of violation it really has involved with it, just makes it really tough for you to grow up and believe that you deserve something good, like a nice relationship, you know? So, I give you props for that, and for people watching, just think about that when you have your friends that are going through it, to step back and say, you know, what might Josh be going through? What might Tina be going through? And just try and support the two of them through it, you know?
Since I'm the only single one. So, I actually agree with all of them. But just make sure that when you're single like me, you're working on yourself, because you don't want to get into the relationship and then bring all that trauma out. I actually was listening to two people yesterday. I was listening to Steve Harvey. His advice was to keep your friends out of your marriage or your relationship.
That's right.
Because they won't really know the story. If you tell them, once you forgive your partner, but they won't forgive your partner.
Yeah.
Even if it's like something small like
They
that.
hear your story.
I mean, I'm telling you, I've had friends be mad at it's like, oh, you know, she said the F word to you. Oh, I can't believe you forgave her. That's so mean. Oh my God. I can't believe she cursed you. Or, you know, and then I was listening to Michelle Obama, and she was talking about her marriage and how, you know, when they were first dating and trying to be married, you know, they didn't have kids yet. So it was cool, you know, I was doing my career, he was doing his career, he was traveling, I was traveling, and we'll meet up, you know, at the house, you know, whenever. Then she said, we put kids in the picture, then it started to be, wait, where are you going? Why are you not here? You know, and then she started, she's, like you said, started having the tally of, wait, I'm 60, he's 40, I'm 70, he's 70, I'm 30. And so it was like a battle, you know, it was never 50-50 for them. So just realize that, you know, we are a very individualistic society. And I actually learned that in Egypt, because that was one of the things the Egyptians kept talking about, like how Americans, you know, for Egyptians, they like to be in their family unit. So, you know, their parents, then they build a house on top. It might be the brother, then the next house is another brother. The sister usually go away because that's just how it works for them. But he doesn't. The Egyptians don't understand why Americans don't try to hold the family together. You know, I actually cannot live with my mother. I would never try to live with my mother or my father. But I can get it, you know, like helping each other grow, you know, not separating. But we don't have that, you know. I live across the country from my family, you know, so, which I don't mind, but, but
So-
you know, the connection is not there, you know, but you still need to be able to connect with people, connect with friends and family, just to make sure that you are showing up for your life.
Absolutely.
So this is a great discussion, and we're gonna have to have another show on this one, because it's a really good topic, and we could talk about it all day. But right now, I'd like to take some time out and have Dr. Ramona Roberts tell you a little bit about her book and how you can get one.
Sweet, all right. I will give a plug for my pop on this too. My dad's name is Joe Palmario, and the artwork for the covers is actually his part of his butterfly series. So you can find his art at palmarioart.com. Palmario is P-A-L-M-E-R-I-O, art.com. The book really came to be from my work with people in the trauma arena, and finally having enough requests of people saying, can you tell my wife this? Can you tell my husband this? Can you tell my kids this? Can you tell my mom this? And there are excellent trauma books out there. And some of them can be really tough reads, even the bestsellers, even the, you know, some of them can just have a lot of technical information. So what I really tried to do was just give a brief snippet, an overview in several sections, so you can learn a little bit about what trauma is, how we would define it, what it looks like. You can learn how trauma impacts the brain, impacts cognitions, all of your thought processes, how it impacts relationships, right? Emotions. There's a section on how racial trauma comes in. There's a section on what you can do. So it's a quick read. It's less than 120 pages of actual reading. Lee, got that? There's some examples I think that are really relatable. I've got great feedback. I'm so appreciative for all of the people that have given me reviews and have given me feedback that aren't really even in the reviews, just from my interactions with folks that have said they've read the book. And so I think it'd be a really relatable book, quick, easy read. It's written in pretty digestible language. I think the only section that really gets technical is the one on the brain, because I talk about some brain parts, but I break them down for you to understand them. I really just want to spread it out there for family members, to, hence the name, make sense of what hasn't made sense. Catchy title, right?
Yes. That's so go out, get your book. Amazon.
It's anywhere you can get books. Amazon, Barnes & Noble. We sold out at Barnes & Noble. We did an event there. It was really cool. Yeah, I'm so excited. So anywhere online you can get books. iUniverse is the publishing company. You can go on their website and get it. You can check out the reviews on Amazon. Make sure you want to pick it up. And if you like it, I'd love for you to give me an Amazon review. If you don't like it, don't give me a review. Just kidding. But pass the words along. And
as
is
you
this
guys,
one more time?
and as you guys all know, you guys can all get my book, Transformations: How to Get You 180 Degrees, right on Amazon. It comes in ebook or a paperback. And if you are local and you want me to give you a signed copy, just hit me up on Facebook or send me an email, transformationslc14@gmail.com, or call me at 484-772-7079. Now, we also have some tumblers, we have cups, t-shirts, hats, that's got any logo you'd like on it, with your sobriety date on it, personalize it with your name. Just hit us up, let us know. Josh, what's your information?
Transformationsjosh.23@gmail.com. 484-926-8358 is the phone number. Macho Camacho on Facebook. You can also, anybody watching on my Facebook Live, any tumblers, any of the hats, hoodies, just get with me and we'll get you right.
And now what we're going to do is we are going to do our painting raffle that is going to go to the winner for...
So this is Joe Palmario's Santa Claus, 20 by 16 gallery wrapped. What that means is if you could turn it a little bit, Dr. Crawford, they can see the sides. You don't need a frame. It's painted on the sides, so you can see here, you don't need to cover that up with a frame. You can just hang it as is, as a canvas. So we are going to pick the winner. Maybe I'll let Josh do the honors. Thank you so much for all of the people. We managed to get all 9 bikes, all 9 helmets. Our
Yes,
lucky winner
thank you,
is...
everybody.
Ticket number 164055.
What's the name on the
The
back?
Mike Duff.
Mike
Mike
Duff.
Duff! Wonderful!
Congratulations, Mike
Thank you
Duff.
so much!
All
We'll
right.
get this out to you.
So,
Congratulations, Mike.
yep. Again, congratulations. And so, do I have a speaker series coming up this week? I do not.
Nope.
I do have one in Spanish. It's going to be at PA Counseling on Thursday. This Thursday from 5:30 to 7:30, and that's for the Spanish-speaking population. Next week we'll have another podcast.
Next week, as you all know, next weekend is Christmas. We are going to figure out a way. We are going to make it happen either via Zoom, or is it Zoom? Zoom, or we'll be in person. But one way or another, we will continue to keep the podcast coming. So even though it is Christmas, you will still have an episode to look forward to next week.
And I do want to inform you guys, I do have January and February booked with guest speakers on our podcast. One of the main attractions that we have in early January is a person in long-term recovery. He is a rapper. He raps his testimony, and he's really good. I posted some of his videos on my Facebook if you guys want to look through. I might post his newest video sometime this afternoon. His name is Kalushe. I hope that I'm saying it right, but it's very powerful. His music is very powerful. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yes, I was into the whole rap thing as a child, and still, hip hop will always have a space in my heart. It's just very deep. He's from Pittsburgh. I lived in Pittsburgh for a while, so it's cool to see what he's done with his platform. And I'm very excited to meet him, and he's going to be coming a pretty long way, so it's pretty dope.
And again, any local residents here in Berks County, if you need any information on where to get help, come visit us here at the Berks Rise Center. Ask for Yvonne Stroman or anybody that can help you in this building. They will help assist, get you the help that you so rightfully deserve. If you are scared to call anybody, you can always text us. My phone number again, 484-772-7079. Message me on Facebook. I'm okay with that. Josh is always willing to talk to anybody.
484-926-8358. Macho Camacho on Facebook. Do not hesitate. Want to say thank you so much to Dr. Centrell and Dr. Ramona for joining us. This was a little bit longer of an episode, but at the same time, we've actually been getting a little bit of requests that they would enjoy it to be longer, and we had 2 amazing guests, so we hope you guys enjoy.
Also, if you guys need their information for some services, they will also give you their contact.
My email, rroberts, so it's rroberts @caron.org, CARON.
You can find me at optionspa.com or also on all social media platforms at DRCYNTRELL site.
Thank you. And again, as always, thank you for watching us. Thank you for all your support. And for all you guys that need help, please do come out, reach out. Don't let that arm be 1,000 pounds. Have a nice week.
God bless you. See you next weekend. Happy holidays.
That was fun.